Hello, hello, dear students of grade 6. I'm glad to see you all. Welcome back to the English conversation class. How are you doing today? I hope you're all good. Today we are practicing listening and writing. So first of all, we will watch a video. After that, we will answer 14 questions on the video. So my advice before you start watching the video, take a look at the questions. Okay, but I will tell you the questions when the video will be finished. So let's watch the video first.
A world of instruments. Chapter 1. Instruments of long ago. A long time ago, people began to make music. We do not know how music really began. People did not write, so they could not tell us. We do not know anything about the first instruments or the first musicians. Maybe music started when a person was walking through the woods. He or she might have heard a bird tapping on an old hollow log. The sound was interesting. Maybe the person hit the log to make the sound again. Was this the first drum? Maybe music started when a person was walking through a field on a windy day. He or she heard the wind blow across the stem of a hollow plant. The sound was interesting. Maybe the person took the stem and blew into it to make the sound again. Was this the first flute? There is one thing we know for sure. People made musical instruments long ago. We can see paintings of these instruments on the walls of old buildings and tombs. Sometimes, scientists can even find old instruments. These old instruments are not exactly like the ones we have today. As people took these instruments to new places, they changed them. Over a long time, the instruments changed again and again. Those first instruments have become the ones we have today. Chapter 2. Flutes. One of the oldest instruments that researchers found is an instrument like a flute. In a cave in Europe, someone found this very old instrument. It was made from a bone. The instrument was broken, but scientists knew it was a flute. It has holes in it where a person's fingers would go. Researchers believe that it is over 40,000 years old. Early flutes were probably pipes. They were instruments held in front of the mouth. Only later did people learn how to make them to hold to the side. For example, some were made of bamboo and held to the side. Old pictures of bamboo flute players can be seen on temples. Some show a man riding a cow while playing a flute. Bamboo flutes were being made in China over 4,500 years ago. They became popular instruments for people there. Different people have changed the flute in many ways. It can be different lengths. It can have different numbers of holes. It can be made of bamboo, metal, or other materials. All of these changes give flutes different sounds for different uses. Chapter 3. Bells. People in China also used bells long ago. People played bells while enjoying their time together. They played bells after working all day in the fields. Some bells were single bells that were hit with a hammer. Other bells were very small. These small bells were put together as a chime. Such chimes were known in China over 2,200 years ago. The early bells of China had a unique shape. They were not round like many bells today. They looked more like two curved roof tiles put together. They were hollow inside. These kinds of bells could make two different sounds. Chimes of these bells were often used to make music for others to enjoy. Later, Buddhism came to China. Then bells became important for Buddhist ceremonies. Over time, the bells used at Buddhist temples changed. Temples began using round bells. Round bells made longer lasting sounds when people rang them. The longer sound was preferred over the shorter one. China was not the only country with bells. Bells were important in other countries as well. People of all cultures used small bells to put on their clothes. Some people even put bells on animals, like horses or camels. The bell has not changed much over the years. It is very simple. It is still a common instrument today. Chapter 4. Horns. It is hard to guess when people first used horns as musical instruments. This is because very old horns are hard to find. Some may look like natural things. For example, the first horn was probably used to make noise, not music. A person blowing on a large shell can make a noise to warn or call his or her friends. This kind of horn is hard to find. Today, it probably just looks like a big shell. Researchers know that horns are old instruments. They know this from very old paintings and stories. There are famous stories about armies using horns long ago. Do you know the story of Joshua and the Battle of Jericho? Horns played a very important part in that battle. We can also see pictures of men playing horns on Egyptian tombs. A good example of a painting like this was found in Tutankhamun's tomb. That tells us that people were making and using horns a long time ago. Horns changed over time. They changed because their use changed. At first, they were mostly used for work or for war. Later, they were used more often for making music. Horns went through some very interesting changes in Europe around the 1800s. At that time, keys were added to different kinds of horns. These keys allowed players to change the sounds they played. There were already ways to change the sounds with older kinds of horns. However, the keys made these instruments better for playing music. Chapter 5. Violins. Even though the violin has not been around for very long, stringed instruments have been. People believe the idea for the first stringed instrument came from the bow and arrow. As a hunter pulled the string and let it go, he heard the sound it made. Maybe that gave him the idea for making music with strings. The harp may be an example of this. Many people have made different instruments with strings. For some stringed instruments, the player pulled the strings with his or her fingers. For others, the player used something like a hammer to hit the strings. For others, a player used a stick with other strings on it. The two strings were touched together, and then the stick was moved. The string on the instrument then made sound. The stick with the string is called a bow. Violins are instruments that use strings on strings. Players use bows to play them. However, players can also pull the strings when playing some songs. When they play this way, It is something like guitar players who pull guitar strings. People believe that the first violin was made in Italy after the 1400s. People making instruments were trying many new things with stringed instruments at that time. They also kept making changes to violins as well. Then, the perfect violin was made in the 1600s. The great violin maker, Antonio Stradivari, lived from 1644 to 1737. During his life, he was able to design a violin that is still famous. Almost all violin makers still follow Stradivari's design. Even today, having a Stradivarius is the dream of many violin players. Chapter 6. Orchestras. In any music store, a person can buy the best flutes, bells, horns, and violins. Schools even offer classes to learn how to play them. Not everyone wants to be a musician, however. Most people like to listen to music. They do not want to play music. Those people are still lucky. They can enjoy the music made by these instruments on the radio, or they can hear it on music CDs, through computers, or at concerts. At an orchestra concert, people can hear many instruments playing together. Orchestras usually have a lot of string players. The winds of the orchestra include flute and horn players. Another part of the orchestra includes drum and bell players. People who go to concerts today are very lucky. As they listen, they can enjoy wonderful music. All of the sounds from different instruments make beautiful music together. The instruments from a long time ago could not make this kind of music. Instruments continue to change even today. Maybe people will find ways to make them sound better. Or maybe they will find ways to make them easier to play. We just need to keep our eyes and ears open for what comes next in the music world.
Alright, I hope you enjoyed that story. It's a long story and interesting story. I'm pretty sure that some of you love to play musical instruments or love to sing. So let's look at the questions. Number 1. Which instrument was amongst the oldest instruments that researchers found? Number 2. What was it made of? Number 3. Where might we see the old pictures of bamboo flute players? Number 4. Where and when were bamboo flutes made? Number 5. What is a chime? Number 6. Which ceremonies did use the bells in China? Number 7. Which animals did people put the bells on? Number 8. Where can we see the old pictures of men playing horns? Number 9. What were the first purposes of using horns? Number 10. When were the keys added to different types of horns? Number 11. What kind of instrument a violin is? Number 12. What's the name of the most famous violin maker? Number 13. What instruments do the winds of the orchestra include? And the last but not the least, number 14. How can we listen to music today? Well, that's it. I wish good luck to you. Tomorrow when we meet, we will check out the answers. If you need some more help or more time, that's okay. We can work it out. Have yourself a beautiful day and See you in our next class. Bye bye.